and welcome to IFMA San Diego's February meeting. My name is Sherry Perkins and I am the chapter president. We have a packed agenda, so let's get started. If you're a facility manager or first-time attendee, please look in your email. You would have received a Grubhub certificate. If you did not receive it, please contact Karen, our IFMA administrator, in the chat. Now, last week, you received a proposal via email for the approval of new officers on the executive board. Please know that I remain president and Glinda remains the first VP as elected in December. The rest of the executive board was in transition due to lack of volunteers to backfill those important positions. We now have filled those positions, and with your approval, we'll move forward as a stronger team for the chapter. The changes in officers would be Kirsten Finneran would become the second vice president, Michael Acosta, the third vice president, Melissa Gutierrez, secretary, and Sarah Suter, treasurer. And please indicate now with your approval by saying aye.
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 Anyone
Hey.
disapproving this action? Okay.
Aye.
Did I get all the ayes? Okay.
Aye.
Anyone disapproving, say nay. And there's no one on mute, right? Okay, good. Okay, from the verbal vote, thank you very much. The ayes have it, and we will move forward and congratulate our official congratulations to our new officers of 2021. Yay, congratulations,
Yay.
everybody. Yay. Thank you for the virtual clap. I appreciate that. As president, many people are interested in where I plan to lead this chapter. So to keep it interesting, what I thought I would do is explain those ideas by a virtual interpretive dance. I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call. It's Glinda. Hi, Glinda. What? No? Oh, come on. What do you mean no interpretive dance? It did not make babies cry. That's just rude. Well, then what are we doing? Oh, we're going to do, we're going to do a live IG interview and Q&A when Tuesday, February 16th at 4 p.m. Yes. How do we find it? Oh, if you're on Instagram, follow the IFMA San Diego group and you'll be able to get to the interview, or just be on the page when it starts at 4 p.m. Why am I repeating everything you say? That's because we're live on, hello. Okay, well, speaking of Glinda, she reminded me at the beginning of the year that both of us had promised to get our credential, our next credential, which is the Certified Management Professional credential. So what we're doing is we are going to have a roundtable on February 25th at, let's see, I believe it starts at, is it 3 p.m.? 3 p.m. 3:30. 3:30. You can come early, but still 3:30. We're going to be talking about the credentials, the importance of the credentials, because if you've noticed, if you've been looking for a job, a lot of the FM job postings are asking for an IFMA credential. So let's take this opportunity and find out about them. So at this roundtable, which is an FM only roundtable, we will have IFMA Educator of the Year presenting to us and answering all questions, every question that you could have on this credential, how to obtain it, how to take the test, how to ask any questions about it, what level do I qualify for? If you are in charge of an organization of FM people, this might be an opportunity for you to learn more about it. So the 25th of February from 3:30 till about 5 o'clock, answering all the questions. The most exciting part though, is that we have a drawing, depending on how many people, right? No, we have a drawing of $500 going towards the education or the educational materials or towards the exam. $500 drawing. Now that's a lot to get you started. So remember, come and be part of this roundtable. Come join us. Come and see what the possibilities are. And now we'd like to hear from today's sponsor, Core Data. Brian?
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Brian Shute of Coro Data Records and Shredding. We provide certified record storage, document destruction, imaging, data storage. across California. I'm here in San Diego, though. Lovely San Diego. Our clients tell us they like our local, great, easy to reach customer support, and we have good rates. So if you have any questions, please let me know following our short video.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Up to you, Sherry.
Thank you. In other news, on March 10th, IFMA San Diego will be presenting the subject of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Everyone is invited. Let's go now to our woman on the scene, Lydia Reyes, to report on our newest members. Lydia?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, all the IFMA members. At this time, I'd like to introduce a couple of our new members. Some are with us and some are not. I am going to introduce our first new member who could not be with us today, but Chris Josh. He's with Bax Construction, currently a project manager, which is a general contractor. Bax Construction is a general contractor in San Diego. He specializes in tenant improvement, ground up projects, working with a variety of clients in healthcare, lab work, office, and law firms, to name a few. And Chris experiences in facilitating those projects, construction, and logistics management. On his time off, he loves working and enjoying spending time with his wife, Laura, and two daughters, Sawyer and Emerson. And then we have another new member. His name is David Bates. He is with us today, and he works for MCOR Services Mesa Energy Systems, and they are an HVAC mechanical contractor that specializes in maintenance, retrofit, building automation, and energy conservation. His role is account manager, and he's responsible for account development, sales, maintaining customer relationships. And again, on his fun time, he loves spending time with his family, attending concerts. However, it's been almost a year that he's happened to be at one, and cooking. And we've got some new members that are with us. Nick Rota from Retrofin, and Brenda Cote from JJF Flooring, Haley Ramosco from Short Total Office, and Joshua Korn from SIE Culinary Management. Welcome all. And you all did not, who I mentioned last, did not send me an email with your information. So we'll catch you on the next one. But thank you guys. Welcome, welcome to the IFMA San Diego chapter. We are really glad to have you here.
Thank you, Lydia.
Back to you, Sherry.
Thank you, Lydia, and welcome to our new members. Now I'd like to hand it over to Denise, our Chair of Professional Development, to introduce our speakers today. Denise?
Hello, hello. I am Denise Temez with Milliken Floor Covering, co-chair of the IFMA Professional Development Committee. I am here to introduce our wonderful speakers for today. David Marino and John Jarvis from Hughes Marino, speaking on the topic of commercial real estate and the effects of COVID-19 on the San Diego market. David Marino is the Executive Vice President and co-founder for Hughes Marino. He has been exclusively representing tenants since 1991, completing over 15 million square feet, comprised of over 1,000 transactions. David specializes in high-value, time-critical, and complex transactions for technology, life science, and business service companies. He is an expert in the strategic planning, market assessment, financial analysis, business terms structuring, negotiations aspects of commercial real estate. John Jarvis is the Senior Vice President of Hughes Marino. He has been representing California's leading companies in commercial real estate assignments since 1986. John's project experience stretches across all aspects of corporate real estate activities, including strategic planning and needs assessment, negotiations and transaction structuring, lease renewal and renegotiation, facility purchase, build to suit, and project teams leadership for both California and national multi-market clients. For today's presentation, please put all questions in the chat box and we will answer them at the end with a Q&A session with our speakers. Please welcome our guests for today's presentation, David and John.
Thanks, Denise. That was a wonderful intro, almost like we wrote it ourselves.
There was so much more I could have said.
You know, the real point of view I think that we bring to this presentation, you know, John and I have been doing commercial real estate between the two of us for 65 years in San Diego County. So we know a little bit about the market and the business. But the point of view we bring as a firm that only represents tenants, if you all don't know us, is I call this the no spin zone. We're calling balls and strikes as we see them. We don't represent landlords. We don't provide any services to building owners. And in that context, we're not trying to backstop the market, right? Like the whole brokerage community, when the market trends down like it is now, is called upon to rally to try to support rents and tell a story that the market isn't as bad as it really is. And while we don't wish bad things to happen to landlords, facts are facts and data is data. And we are on the front line, literally working with thousands of clients over the last year, trying to figure out what's happening and what the future holds. So if you don't know who we are, we also now have our Denver office opened, which we just opened last month. So we're in Seattle, San Francisco, LA, Orange County, Denver, and San Diego, headquartered here, of course. And John and I are client facing for clients that have national or international requirements. So I'm personally doing work in about a dozen states right now, including 4 projects in Mexicali, Mexico. So I think we have not only the local market knowledge of what's going on, but a broader regional and kind of hyper global perspective, I think, of what's going on with corporate America real time and into the future. Let me, if I can, well, first of all, I want to mention something to dovetail into what Sherry said about career management, what a great IFMA is. I see a lot of friends and clients on the call, but please use us as an extension of your network. I see both Mike Fortin from EcoATM and Tom Lefevre from ICW on the call, who are friends, and I was the one who introduced those gentlemen to the executives of the companies where they're now working when those companies were looking for a facility executive. And John and I maintain a very robust and active library of executives and facility people in transition. So if you are ever going to be in transition, please let us know. We'll treat it as confidential and be part of your network to try to help. Let me dive into our presentation. I'm going to do a share screen here real quick and get into our slide deck. So sorry, that is not quite the view that I want, but I'm going to work with it anyway. So sorry.
Go to the slideshow tab and do slideshow from the beginning.
Yep. Unfortunately, the sharing box is blocking that view, so I can't get at it. Unfortunately, kind of the same problem I had a little bit earlier. But I'm just going to make this work.
Or if you press
Um,
F5.
F5, somebody said.
Yeah, press F5. It'll automatically go to slideshow. If you have a Microsoft, if you're working on an Apple, I apologize. I don't know Apple.
Yep. Sorry about that. Let me just open it again here and see what's wrong here. So apologize.
Go, Dave. I wouldn't worry about it.
Yep, I do need to open the document though to get us rolling here. So sorry that glitched on me. I might just go kind of old school and keep the format here. So we already did our introductions. Let me talk about what's going on. So 2021 is going to be the strongest office tenants market that we've seen in over 20 years. And we've been through all of the recessions. We've been through the tech wreck of 2000, the global financial crisis of 08, 09, and the recession of the early 90s that was really so traumatic on the office space and commercial real estate sector in general. But what's happening is there's a tsunami of office inventory coming. And what I think about this, I think about how our industry, brokers and landlords, are kind of looking off the shore and trying to see what's coming in. And what it is not a wave they're going to surf, but it's a tsunami that is going to flood the market with office inventory. And it's already started. Meanwhile, there's just anemic demand. There are very few tenants in the market. Most companies that have leases expiring are doing 6-month extensions or 1-year extensions. But the supply imbalance that has already started has pushed rents down 20% already year to date when you include free rent considerations. So pre-COVID, we didn't really see a lot of free rent. Now, pretty much every lease or sublease we're doing has at least 1 month free per year of term, and some even more. And some markets that are even softer, like we're doing work in Houston and other markets where literally we're getting a year free on 6-year deals. And that is a little bit of potentially a future to come. Some markets like San Francisco are in absolute free fall, where rents are already down 30% and subleases in that market are priced now at 40% pre-COVID pricing. So what we've got now is a trend in office space. This is trend number 1 that's occurred. And this started really early in the pandemic as companies were trying to think about what to do with their office space. More and more tenants by the month started putting their space on the market for sublease as they determined they would never reoccupy it. And so, and this is always a leading edge going into any recession where you see this incredible uptick of sublease inventory. And so this is really the first thing that's occurred. And it's shown here in some real data. So this is now looking at pre-COVID, so January of last year to year to date, where we are in the major markets in California. So what's interesting is San Diego is doing better than some of the major metro areas. If you look at San Francisco, literally the sublease inventory has doubled since pre-COVID. And just to put it in perspective historically, the largest amount of sublease space in San Francisco ever was back during the tech wreck when there was 5.5 million square feet of space on the market for sublease. There's now bouncing around 9 million square feet of office space for sublease in San Francisco. And just to put that in perspective, the entire downtown market of San Diego, okay, the entire downtown is 9 million square feet, or UTC is around 7 million square feet. So imagine that in one moment in time, an entire submarket in San Diego County is now available for sublease. And that's basically what's happened in San Francisco, which is about a 65 million square foot market. This is a major, major drag on what landlords are able to do to compete for tenants. Something similar in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles now, there's almost 10 million square feet of sublease inventory. But in San Diego, it hasn't been as dramatic, and in Orange County also. But what's happening real time in San Diego is all of the deals that are being done in subleases. Literally half of the transactions we're doing right now are going into subleases because tenants want shorter term, cheap rents, plug and play space, on demand space, and you find that with subleases. So we've been surprised that this number hasn't hyperinflated and doubled or tripled. But what's happening is inventory on the sublease market is going away basically as fast as it's coming on. So it's sort of hit this equilibrium. But still, subleases are a problem for landlords because landlords can't get any leasing traction right now. The tenant demand is all looking at subleases, 1 or 2 or 3 year deals, things that are 20, 30% off market, and furnished. So landlords are losing deals every week. But there's a different narrative with industrial. This is the first time in our careers where we've seen a decoupling of the markets, where all asset classes didn't rise and fall together. So this is sublease inventory for these same markets for industrial space. Again, the blue bar being pre-pandemic, the green bar being now, and everyone is down, okay? So what's happened in industrial is there has been incredible demand around supply chain and e-commerce based companies. For example, Amazon alone has leased over 1 million square feet of new buildings in San Diego County in the last 9 months. Okay, and Amazon has leased 150 million square feet nationally since the pandemic, basically doubled their footprint, and is single-handedly responsible for 40% of all the leasing in the United States since the pandemic started around industrial space. So we have this really crazy tale of two cities where office inventory is going through the roof and industrial's falling through the floor. And it is this two different things happening in the economy. As corporate America has determined they can remote work and have more people at home, or they're forced to remote work and abandon the office space, industrial companies are screaming in terms of demand. And something similar is happening in San Diego life science space, where we do a lot of work. We have never seen a stronger life science market. Rents in Torrey Pines are now at $550. New developments up there are coming out of the ground from Health Peak and Alexandria, priced at $6. Even lab space in Sereno right now is going for $435 to $475. So it's really amazing. The billions of dollars that have been raised in the life science industry is driving tremendous demand. There's been over 1 million square feet of life science leases signed since the pandemic started. So again, complete departure from office space. But this really is more about office space because we think that's where the story really is. The second trend that's happened with office space, and unfortunately we've had a couple of hundred clients do this since the pandemic started, is companies that have had leases expiring from last summer to this first quarter, particularly companies under 10,000 square feet, are going full remote. So they're not renewing for 6 or 12 months. They're relinquishing their office space as the leases have expired. And what's happening as a result is it's causing an incredible uptick in vacancy and availability rates. So landlords are incredibly frustrated. They can't renew many of these tenants that have leases expiring real time because the tenants are just handing them the keys and saying, nope, it's yours. We're not staying. We're not going anywhere. We're going to bring our team back together post-vaccine, post-pandemic, sometime in the summer, or perhaps the fall, or even Q4. So let us show you what effect this has had now on vacancy and availability rates. And we've broken this out from Class A to Class B. And the reason we use availability versus vacancy is that the vacancy number that brokers and landlords use only considers space that's physically vacant on the market. You know, consider you and your significant other decide you're going to buy a house or a condo. Do you ask your broker to show you only the vacant homes for sale? Of course not, right? You say, show me all homes for sale that meet my requirements. And by the way, most of those someone's living in, right? Well, something similar has happened in industrial and office, where the landlord brokerage firms and lenders all look at vacancy rates, but we think vacancy rates understate how bad the market is, particularly in a declining market. And here I think is an example of this. If I told you that the vacancy rate for Class A office in Sereno was going up to 19%, you'd think that's pretty bad. But if I told you the availability rate was 24%, you'd be horrified. Well, that's where we are, okay? If you look at pre-pandemic to where we are, the availability rate has gone up almost 7% in San Diego County for Class A office space. And it's not stopping, okay? That steep line up and to the right is going to keep going for the next 2 or 3 years. And it doesn't end well for building owners of Class A real estate in San Diego County. That trend line I think by the end of the year could very well be up to 30%, and by the end of next year, 35%. And so what availability considers is all space on the market for lease, whether it's vacant or occupied or sublease. Okay, so a sublease, these millions of square feet of sublease often aren't captured as vacant because there might be one person in the space, right? So we have to really look at what's available, because that tells you where the market's really going and what the pool of options is that a tenant has to choose from. The story in San Diego for Class B is a little better, but still you can see that trend line not as steep. It's still up and to the right, and about 17%, certainly by the end of the year, will be at 20 or perhaps in the low 20s. So this is very, very bad news for landlords and building owners. And part of the problem is the brokerage industry is still talking about vacancy rates, which understates how bad the market is and makes it look better than it really is. But the availability is really what's going on out there. So it is up and to the right and getting worse by the quarter for building owners. And we're all versed on what happens with supply and demand. When supply goes up and demand goes down, pricing collapses. Well, what's happening real time is that landlords are all trying to play the free rent game. They're throwing more tenant improvements and moving allowances at deals, and they're breaking away from face rates. We're doing leases in Class B buildings about 20, 30 cents a foot off of asking rents. In Class A buildings, we're doing leases as much as 30 to 50 cents a foot off of asking rents. Or we had a crazy situation just happened last month with a law firm in UTC that's a full floor, and they're in the American Assets building. And the tenant had signed a letter of intent with us to move to an Irvine company building and save a couple $1 million over 5 years. American Assets came back at the last minute and basically rewrote the square footage so the 24,000 square foot of occupancy would only be counted as 17,000 square feet for 5 years. And so what they did is they played this accounting game, calling it phantom vacancy or functional vacancy as they referred to it. And they carved about $850,000 out of the economics at the last minute. And so the lesson learned is you can't just renew a lease and act captive and think that the landlord is going to treat you well. That just doesn't happen. In a declining market, unfortunately, you have to go to market, you have to do the work, you have to get your options lined up and be 1 foot out the door, signing a letter of intent somewhere else in order to understand what the current landlord's real bottom line is. And that is our experience in the last 3 recessions, and that's where things are right now. It's literally just a knife fight in the market, negotiating one lease at a time, one landlord at a time, taking them to the brink of disaster before that tenant is about ready to sign somewhere else, before you really understand what the best and final really is, because best and final today doesn't mean what it says it is.
Hey, Dave, and so I think it's worth pointing out that we're in this moment where there literally is no such thing as market rent. In the pre-pandemic mode, you could look at comps. There are different ways and peg something like a market rent, but there's literally no market rent today. And for the last 12 months, we've been in pure price discovery mode. And suddenly we feel like we were kind of built for this. But just going to this, realizing that there is no market rent. If you ask a broker to tell you what market rent is for Class A or Class B, we're discovering that real time every day. Circumstances vary, and that's the work that we're doing. Hey, Dave, can you speak? People are asking definition Class A versus Class B. It's not exactly scientific, but why don't you quickly describe what's the difference?
Yeah, so Class A buildings are those that are the higher quality, top quartile buildings in the market relative to their peers. For example, you have a lot of 3-story buildings in Carlsbad that are steel frame with granite on the outside and stone finishes and fitness facilities on site. Well, those are Class A buildings. If you move that building to UTC, it would be a Class B building because it's relative to its peers. The Class B buildings are the 2-story concrete tilt-up office buildings like you see on Eastgate Mall or Town Center Drive in UTC, or that are so commonly found in other markets. But Class A buildings are the more flagship buildings, the mid-rise, high-rise buildings that have steel construction and that are typically more amenitized. But John, to your point, it is literally determining market one lease at a time right now. It is something that we've seen before, but I talked to a landlord a couple of months ago and I said, look, why don't you lower your asking rates? And the answer probably won't surprise you, but it will shock you a little bit. And he said, I don't want to lower my asking rates because when a tenant calls my broker or me and wants to renew short-term or expand, I want to be able to show a 450 number. So when I give them a 440 deal, they feel like they're getting a discount. So you've got to understand that our industry operates with very little transparency. You don't really know what the landlord is willing to do. And you certainly, through the landlord's broker, aren't going to hear what your possibilities are. And we might have done a lease with that same landlord at $395 with 20 bucks in TIs and 6 months free on a 5-year lease the week before. I mean, that's the kind of disparity that we're seeing in the market right now. And so landlords have not lowered their asking rates pretty much nationally since the pandemic started. There is very much a agenda to try to price fix the market and hold the line on rents and force the brokerage community to support that and to pretend like this collapse in the market, that this free fall isn't happening. But it is happening, and it's happening nationally. If you look at the national markets, and these are the top 15 markets pretty much around the country, this is pre-COVID to now availability rates. And with the exception of Washington, D.C., which is sort of frozen in time because they have all the government agencies and the defense infrastructure there that really is unchanged, all of these markets have experienced double-digit or massive double-digit increases in availability rates. And it is a bigger they are, the harder they will fall story. So if you look at the strongest markets around the country, like San Francisco and Seattle, pre-COVID, San Francisco, you have an uptick of 62% in the availability rate since COVID started. Seattle, 45%. And literally you can go into these markets, and if you need a space between 2,000 and 4,000 square feet, there's hundreds of options. In fact, in San Diego today, if you were to survey UTC and Del Mar Heights from 2,000 to 4,000 square feet, there would be 70 or 80 options available for you. So there is just this flood of inventory. But I think the bad news really coming from landlords is it's going to get worse. So there's two other things that are going on right now in the market that are going to make a bad situation persist for a number of years, because we've made this assertion that these availability and vacancy rates are going to trend up for another 2 or 3 years. In the short term, you've got a whole bunch of tenants that are in default. So there are still tenants that we're aware of that are in occupancy of their space that haven't paid rent since March, or some limped with some PPP funding and paid rent through the summer or maybe in the fall, but are still kind of limping along. The problem is the landlords don't want to evict those people. What they're trying to do is file claims for breach of contract, but it's estimated that anywhere from 4 to 8% of all the office space have tenants that are in default or in not paying. Okay, so there is going to be a price to pay for that, right? Eventually, this year, landlords will flush all those folks out and take all that inventory back. So that's coming to market. Okay, that's not on the market as available yet. The other thing that's happening is people are asking the wrong question. People are saying, well, will corporate America come back to the office? The answer is yes. We firmly believe everyone's coming back. Okay, but everyone's coming back smaller. And what we're generally seeing is that most companies are talking about a work from home policy where anywhere from 5 to 10% of their employees would be post-COVID fully remote. And that's either because those people have moved out of state, or their commuting distance is such that they won't be required to come in the office, or their seniority is such, or their work function is such. We've had a handful of companies actually say 20 to 25% of their people would be working full-time remote, but we think those are outliers. But generally, 5 to 10% aren't coming back. Well, guess what? That means companies can get smaller by 5 or 10%. But if you add to that, it seems to be that there's another at least 20% that are going to only be using the space part-time, maybe a day a week, a day a month, or a couple days a week. And more companies real-time are talking about hoteling and office sharing and workstation sharing as a policy. And so if you add that into the mix, there are more seats as a result of that that aren't going to be needed. And what nobody's really talking about is the rifts that have happened across corporate America. I would bet most of you on the call have experienced some kind of layoff within your organization since COVID. Well, the facts are that millions of white collar jobs have been lost across the country, millions. And that means tens of millions of square feet of office space isn't needed anymore to support those people. And most of those jobs, at least in the short term, aren't coming back. So what we're already seeing are tenants with 2021 lease expirations coming back at 50 to 80% of their pre-COVID size. So we're working with a financial services firm called Brandis Investment in Delmar Heights. They're 50,000 square feet and they're moving to 19,000 square feet. We're working with a 3,000 square foot law firm going down to 2,200 square feet. And I could give you 100 other examples across industries and across size of tenants where most companies are planning to come back smaller. And companies that are trying to sublease their space that are clients of ours, we've got clients that are trying to sublease 25,000 square feet because they only need 15. And companies that are looking to sublease 15 because they only need 10. So I call this the death by 1,000 slices for landlords. One lease at a time, day after day, as tenants downsize, as they have to confront their lease expiration. And if you assume that the average lease is 5 years, okay, 20% of the market every year gets to address their lease. So in 2021, 20% of companies are going to transact, and most of them are going to get smaller. And that's going to happen again next year, and it's going to happen the year after that. And so landlords are confronted with this really dire situation that, yeah, there will be some velocity in the market. Tenants are talking about coming back in the summer and the fall and Q4, but they're coming back smaller. And when they come back smaller, availability rates are going to go up as tenants downsize one tenant at a time. So this is something that is coming their way that people haven't really thought through yet. But this is really what's going to crush the office market, is this concept of negative net absorption. It's when tenants relinquish more space than they bring on board and they lease. And that is what I think 80, 90% of all office tenants are going to do, and they're all getting smaller. So what does this mean for companies like yourselves as you're starting to think through the next year, 2 or 3? Well, you know, some companies are going to be looking at subleasing office space, at getting rid of what they currently have. And we have about 50 clients that we've taken listings for to sublease their space in San Diego County. And while it's a little clumsy for us because we only represent tenants, right? We don't want to create a conflicted business model. If a tenant is in distress and that customer of ours is trying to solve a problem, we feel we have to be a good partner, and that referring, you know, one of you to a general brokerage firm isn't the right answer. We're going to roll up our sleeves, and also we take sublease listings at no listing commission. So if we represented the tenant going into a lease and now we've got to represent them in subleasing it, we feel that it's double dipping or unethical and inappropriate to kind of, you know, treat a client like that. So if someone needs to get out of space, we're taking those subleases on, we're working hard on them, we're getting them priced right and advertising them at big discounts to the marketing and getting deals done. So we've gotten probably about 15 clients out of their space so far year to date through subleasing. But here's a few kind of bullet points to really be careful as you consider a sublease. So if you're going into one, you really have to consider the credit of the sublessor, because if the sublessor defaults and you're in the sublease, that default under the master lease wipes out the sublease. So, and people have been burned on this in past recessions. What's weird about this one, though, is that the credit on most sublessors is surprisingly good. You know, in prior recessions, companies that were subleasing were in financial distress and broken. Okay, companies are now subleasing because they just don't need the space. So it's a different credit situation now than we've seen before. But if you are subleasing and you get a bunch of furniture and equipment with it, make sure that you get ownership of that furniture up front, not at the end of the term, because if the sublessor does default, the trustee of that company could basically make a claim on all the furniture and move it out. And now you don't even have the furniture, nor do you have the sublease, which is another reason to put any deposits in the form of letters of credit, not cash, because if your sublessor does default, that cash is gone. You're never getting it back. And a lot of times people ask us about the WeWorks of the world and the Industriouses. You know, they are all fighting for their life right now. Many of them are in default. Many of them aren't paying rent or paying partial rent. And we think that because of COVID, the experience of sharing the kombucha bar and a bunch of pizzas with people you don't know, their safety protocols, is probably not going to be a popular thing. So it's going to be the end of days for a lot of these co-working and office sharing situations. The other thing that we're going to go into is a lease restructuring cycle. And what this is when you're in a lease that has a couple of years of term left and you're paying above market because market's now down 20, 30%. It's the ability to do a lease extension in exchange for a rent reduction or a reduction in the size of the premises or a reset of your base year or some tenant improvements to remodel or all of those things. So, people are starting to talk about this, but they don't really understand what it is. And having done hundreds of them before in the last 3 recessions, they require really 3 things to be successful. Okay, the first is the market has to be down and everybody agrees it's down. And the problem that we have right now is that the landlord and the brokerage community is still out to lunch and generally not in complete alignment with where the market really is and where it's really going. And so I talked to a listing broker representing American Assets in Solana Beach the other day, and they're still pretending like rents are $410 a foot because they renewed 3 tenants for 1 and 2 year renewals at $410 with a month free per year of term on the renewals. But the reality is they're probably $1 a foot above where market really should be. And so we're just simply not doing new leases with that landlord. We're moving on. We're finding other landlords that actually understand what is happening, that have realistic pricing, and that are able to step up to the new market reality. So there's still a big disconnect in the market today with landlords and their brokers and what they think market is and what's really happening. The second thing that has to really happen is you kind of need to be within a 2-year window of your lease expiring. If your credit is exceptional and you're willing to sign a lease of 7 to 10 years, I could say that lease term remaining might be as much as 3 years. But generally 2 years is kind of the window that you have to be considered for doing one of these restructurings. The third thing is you just have to have reasonable financial statements. In other words, you don't have to have Intel or AT&T credit or Qualcomm. You just have to show the landlord that if they cooperate and come to the table to give you these rent reductions, that you're going to be in business to perform under the lease extension. So you don't have to have great credit to pull these things off. John, why don't you talk about kind of this graphic representation of what a lease restructuring kind of looks like?
Sure thing. And, in that prior slide, it talks about not a blend and extend and pretend. I've always bristled at the terminology of a blend and extend. When you go and refinance your home loan, if you've got a 5% loan and rates there at 3, you don't go in and get a 4% blended new rate. No, you repay the old loan and get your new loan at 3%. And this idea that companies were doing something they called a blend and extend and ending up, it was blended a little bit of that horrible above market old rental rate combined with what is close to the new market rental rate. We blend it and that's what we sign up our new lease. No, I don't like that at all. Pretending like you got a good deal. So we think the market is soft enough to go back to a true lease restructure. And here's what I mean by that. And this is somewhat obvious, but it's kind of fun. The blue line represents your current lease. You signed it, it was close to market when you signed it, and it's gone up over time. That curvy dashed line sort of represents the market cycle. And of course, we're in this moment now when that market has had a big decline. And what I'm trying to represent here is this idea that we want to get to a place where the landlord, in order to keep you in the building, is willing to tear up the old lease. We want to get out of paying that last 1 to 2 years of rent. And that's what's represented by this green box. They would be lucky to have you. And we just want to tear up that lease and start over at this new, an orange line. Because in a successful lease restructure in this way, the total dollar savings available, that green box, is only available from your current landlord. if you want to move to a cheaper building, you've got to wait out your current lease, and then you'll see the reduction to a new market rental rate. But no, we want to do that. If space is working for you and you don't need to move or want to move, then we want to drive that landlord to a place where they're literally willing to forego the last above market year or two of the lease. And really, this is our objective when we go into a lease restructure. We think the market is soft enough to accomplish this. And I'll give one caveat. I think it's important to notice that some of these landlords can't go there. I mean, we're talking about declines in market pricing of 20 to 30% or more. And if you've got a landlord or an office building owner with a 70% loan to value, we're approaching the point where they're going to be underwater. You talk about them trying to prop up rents and hold the line on pre-COVID pricing. There was a question in one of the chat about holding on to the contract rental rate and offering some free rent. Of course they are. They're fighting for their lives too. But the truth is that some of these landlords aren't going to be able to meet the new market because they're too highly leveraged. We just need to, we need to study that and anticipate that. But I just wanted you to have this visual that we're not talking about blend and extend. We're talking about creating leverage and bringing the landlord to the table so they literally tear up the lease and write that down to what we need to be the new market today.
Yeah, and there are people screwing this up right now. I'll give you an example. A couple of months ago, I talked to an office tenant in UTC, and they were proud of a result where they added 3 years to their current lease and got 3 months of free rent now in exchange for that. And I said, okay, well, that's a good starting point, but what rental rate did you sign up for the additional 3 years? And they said, well, it just increases each year over our ending rate of our old lease. And I'm like, oh my God, you just made the biggest rookie mistake ever. You just extended the time based on an old market rent that was negotiated 5 years ago that's been increasing every year. And now you're 20, 30% above market in a market that's going down another 10 to 20% next year. And you just inked a lease at 30% or 40% above market to save 3 months worth of rent today. You just basically blew $3 or $4 for every one you saved. And so it is really important that you do these correctly. And I think this is where we're well positioned. While we do a lot of renewals and expansions for clients each year, we move a lot of companies. We move hundreds of companies every year in San Diego. That's what we get, that's our bailiwick. That's what we do for a living. And so when you move companies for a living, landlords take you seriously, right? It's not like some veiled thread. If they don't do something, then you're going to move. It's like, no, we are going to move if you don't do the following. So I think it's just a different conversation after doing this for 30 years that we have with these building owners. They know we're not pulling punches. I'm going to whip through these last couple slides so we leave some time for questions. How's this going to change the office market in the next year or two? So first of all, you don't need to be as ahead of things as you used to be, right? You used to have a 12-month planning cycle because you're going to have this big tenant improvement project and all this construction. Well, that's gone, okay? There is a flood of second generation, high quality, code compliant space coming on the market. And so we actually are recommending shorter planning cycles, particularly as the market's going down each month. We want to get as close as we can to our expiration date so that we can kind of pressure cook the landlord and the process. We don't want to be too far out in front of these things. The second trend is a lot of shorter transactions. Pre-COVID leases were 5, 7, and 10 years. That's gone. Okay, landlords are doing 2 and 3 year deals. I just had a landlord this week agree to a new lease for 1 year in Sorrento Mesa. Okay, because they're betting that in a year this whole pandemic will be behind us and that maybe rents will be back up. They're wrong. Okay, but landlords are doing anything they can to kind of plug the holes right now. And a lot of these subleases that are on the market are available for 2 to 3 years. And here's what's scary. A lot of these subleases that are on the market expire this year and no one's going to sublease it. And that space is going back to the landlord this year. So there's just, like I said, more bad news for landlords to come. Third, more choices and very little competition for space. Pre-COVID, you might have 2 or 3 tenants negotiating on a particular space, but that's gone. There are situations where spaces can sit for months without getting a showing today. There's going to be, number 4, a massive repricing Class A space for Class B prices are less. And the fifth is that the kind of credit enhancements that landlords were typically insisting on pre-COVID just aren't happening anymore. These big letters of credit, except in life science deals, just are a mechanism of the past. So if landlords would be unreasonable on that, you can move on from them and pick someone else. And how it's going to change the workplace. Very slow reemergence of folks back into the workplace. A lot of employees are hesitant to go in. Employers are hesitant of the liability. And it's worse in big markets where mass transit's required, like New York City and San Francisco, or high rises with elevators that people don't want to get in and share with others. The second trend we're seeing is really, death of the bench seating environment. This idea that you're sitting face to face from a colleague and shoulder to shoulder, that's all gone. You're going to have at least 6 foot of separation between people, and maybe as much as 8 in some companies that they're talking about. So we're going to see a little more of a detangling of culture and the workplace. And then the third trend is remote working for most people, is really here to stay, certainly for this year and probably for the foreseeable future on some kind of limited policy. So, this is a change that landlords, I've heard say that, everybody's going to come back and there's going to be back to, people talk about back to normal. There's no going back. We're only going forward, and the future is going to look very different than the past. That's what we know. So let's open it up to Q&A and see what people have to say. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Okay, our first question. Since landlords are losing money on deals are they pulling back on listings to wait out the pandemic in hopes of getting a better deal later?
No. Landlords are fighting the fight that they're in. They're not pulling space off the market and thinking that things are going to be better in a year or two. These landlords are pressured for cash flow, and they have to keep occupancy at what they can and kind of win the deals they can. But they're passing on deals right now. Landlords are not doing transactions they should be doing because they can't satisfy their investor or their lender thresholds that have yet to be adjusted. That's what's happening.
Okay. How are tenants addressing physical spacing of their employees if they are downsizing? Or do they think that there won't be a concern once we reach herd immunity?
Yeah, I think this experience is permanently changing behavior. We have a lot of clients that have talked now about having more offices per person than before. The private office in the last 10, 15 years has sort of gone out of fashion, particularly for smaller companies below 5 and 10,000 square feet. Companies are saying, no, we want to have half our people in offices. So more offices and bigger workstations, I think, are a sign of the times for many years to come. This is a scarring experience on corporate America and facility executives and management teams. Yeah, John.
Let me tell the quick story. I have a client trying to get out of their headquarter office building, 4-story, 100,000 square feet, 25,000 feet per floor. The ground floor of the building is a cafeteria and varied meeting rooms of various sizes. And as we were assessing the building and what we were going to lease out in piece or in whole, that ground floor was a real problem because we didn't think that was going to be easily leasable. It was such an unusual build out, and it was intended to be in service to the other floors. Okay, fast forward, Dave, you were talking about clients and how much they're going to reduce. Here, they were occupying 75,000. They'd already sublet one of the floors, but they're of the mind that they only going to need 25,000 feet when they return. And it turns out that ground floor is exactly what they want. They're saying that we're not going to go back to a 5-day work week where everyone drives in at the same time every day and goes into a private office or a cube. Instead, what they're going to do is allow their employees to choose. And when they do come together in person, they're going to make spaces. So I just wonder if this isn't indicative of more or less what companies are going to start realizing, less of a old style traditional office and cube build out and greater emphasis on various size meeting rooms, because when we gather, it's going to be about coming together in groups, not necessarily about coming in like robots 5 days a week with an 8 a.m. commute. I wonder if we're not moving to this idea that we need build outs that have various size meeting rooms more than we need private offices and cubes.
Thank you. This is a good question. Will landlords prefer shorter lease terms right now if they are below what they think is market value, not wanting to lock in a long-term lease when they can get more later on?
It's a great question. That discount that I shared with you about that law firm in UTC with that renewal, that was originally a 3-year proposal. So American Assets was only willing to discount that rent for the first 3 years of the term. And then when we signed the letter of intent with Irvine, the next business day, when I let them know they had lost the tenant, one business day after that, they called me back and they said, we'll do it for the full 5 years. So, the landlords are doing, again, whatever they have to do right now to keep tenants in seats. And whether that's going ugly on a long-term lease or a short-term lease, you just have to force them to compete, because as John said, there is no market. And so you have to make the market. And I think that's what I like to think of ourselves as being, is we're market makers, not market takers. We're not looking at comps, at what somebody else did 3 months ago or 3 days ago. It is sort of in that moment of time with this tenant, based on their credit and their size and their options, what can we manufacture? What can we engineer for that client as a customized solution? And it's changing by the day. And literally you have to have the fortitude to get people really uncomfortable and take them places they don't want to go. And that's what we do.
Okay. I'm going to ask one more question since we are running out of time. What are the landlords doing to offset the 2030 electric-only buildings costs for infrastructure? Are we seeing a downturn in construction for new buildings in the near future?
Yeah, I worry that if everything I just described is going to be the future, I don't know that there'll be another Class A office building built in my career in San Diego County. You're going to see a lot of construction in life science facilities, Alexandria, Health Peak, BMR. All these folks are underway to bring millions of square feet of lab facilities online in the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to blow everyone's mind with what's happening in UTC, particularly in Campus Point and Torrey Pines and Sorrento. That's where the action is today. But in terms of building new office space, I just don't see it coming. It's just not, the demand is just not going to be there. I mean, when availability is up to 30 or 35% and languishes for years, and rents go down ultimately 30, 40% in 3 to 5 years, just values are going to be destroyed. There just is not going to be the kind of rent income that you can ever rest your pro forma on to justify new construction ever again for probably at least a decade. I won't say forever, but certainly at least a decade.
Do you know if there's been any calculations for a square foot per person? I know currently it's like anywhere from 60 to 150 square feet. Have they increased that during COVID?
Yeah, great question, Renee. Pre-COVID, if you had asked me what my typical client was planning, a lot of companies were getting down to 140 square feet, and this is rentable square feet, okay? So including the core factor and the circulation, 140 to 170 square feet per person was not unusual. That was very common. Now we're typically seeing 200 and even a little higher in some companies, 2.25. So rentable square foot per person is going up. Absolutely.
Denise, I have a quick question.
Sure.
I'm sorry, John, David, do you see that companies that have various divisions are coming together and bringing, like Stanley Black & Decker or Stanley Security put us together with our door division? Do you see that that's happening? They're letting go of, the separate offices, and then we're doing, those office space for the sales reps to come in, but are you seeing that happening?
So I would say this, everyone is looking at everything. Like the workplace is up for debate. And one of the reasons that we see increasing softening occurring is that as staggering as those sublease statistics are, the truth is many companies haven't decided yet. exactly how they're going to go back, what strategies they're going to employ, how they're going to do it. These conversations are happening now. And so combining divisions, clever, other strategies that we could go into. But the truth is this is playing out real time and everything is open for discussion. It's going to be different. And we're in the process of figuring out what that means for your organization today.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up.
Well,
Just want to say,
let me just add, excuse me for
Okay.
interrupting. John and I, and we appreciate everybody participating in the questions. We are here to be of service. And if somebody needs help, brainstorming, support, analysis, whatever it is, no cost, no obligation, we're available confidentially offline to support all of you in what you're going through. So, our contact information is online. We're easy to find. David at hughesmarino.com. John, what's your email address?
John at Hughes Marino.
Yep. So, please reach out to us. We're here to help. And thanks for the opportunity.
Truth be told, we've never been busier. Everyone who's got a lease is pulling up and talking about force majeure. And so we've never been busier over the last 12 months. And it sounds a little corny, but literally we were built for this. We're not aligned with the landlords. This price discovery is what we do. So if we can help in any way, that's why we're here.
Thank you so much. David Marino, John Jarvis of Hughes Marino. Thank you so much for being our speakers today, our sponsor Cora Data, and all of our members and guests for joining us. Thank you again to another successful webinar. If you have any questions, let us know. Have a wonderful day.